Thank you. Tonight, I will be standing in for the mayor who's out of town and the council president, Robert Massey. So we'll go ahead and get started with the work session. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Jason Wax.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jason Wax, Community Engagement Coordinator for the city. And I'm here this afternoon to talk with you about some of our visions that we've been working on for our Neighborhood District Association grant program. We've been doing this probably since about October. I had quite a few conversations with the NDA leadership and internally about some things that we'd like to do to improve the program. So some things I'm going to talk with you about tonight or today is the program's evolution from '98 till today. This has been a program that's been around for 26 years. We'll talk about how the program is currently working and what we learned through our conversations, steps the city's taking to have some cost savings related to the neighbor associations that we hope will help in a variety of ways, but also with the program. And then we'll talk about some of the revisions that we're considering and the benefits of each. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps. So let's go on we're going to do a little journey about the neighborhood grant program for the past 26 years, just to provide some context. So in 1998, there was a resolution that was passed by council, basically expanding the resources available to the neighborhood associations. You know, at that time, the neighborhood associations were relatively new, and this program was really meant to provide some financial support to them so they could achieve their goals, operate their meetings, and do other things to build community. And at that time, there were 4 categories of projects that were available for funding. You had neighborhood organizing and organizational development, neighborhood physical improvements, neighborhood preservation, and then neighborhood cultural, social, and recreational initiatives. At that time, it was a matching grant. So the city had the money in our accounts, and the neighborhoods had to apply project by project to receive the funding. And in addition to that, they had to come up with some sort of a match, dollar for dollar. 25% had to be volunteer, but it could be more. Typically, it was more. A lot of the match came from volunteer hours that they had expected to for each project. That, you know, quite a bit of volunteer hours would go into, and you know, there was a national standard for how much an hour of volunteer time was worth. And that program existed in this way for about 12 years, until 2010, when it turned into the program that we have today. At that time, I think there was conversations about kind of reducing staff time to make the program work a little better, and then also just providing a little bit easier access to the funding for the NDAs so that they didn't have to apply project by project. And so since then, since 2010, we now give each NDA, after they submit an annual report that kind of talks about all the ways that they spent the money through the year, $4,000 per year as a lump sum. And the key points about this program was the categories that I mentioned for the 1998 program didn't change. So we've been relying on those categories for what this money can be used for quite a bit of time, even though we've never really changed the resolution that was originally created. We have a policy that kind of operates, and we update it annually on how the money is sort of administered and the rules behind it. The NDAs can develop their own projects, and they spend the money how they would like to spend the dollars. And that's really important, and that's been the way that they've been doing it since then. And then also community partners can apply for funding from them and do on a regular basis, which is something they highly value. So since, like I said, since last October, so October 2023, we put out a survey, and we have had 2 NDA leadership meetings since then about sort of how the program's working, what's working, what's not. And so we learned some things. We know that the NDAs have goals. They don't typically change them that often. They kind of go from year to year. A lot of the same goals. They can differ, but they tend to kind of be the same. They definitely recognize there's not a lot of it in terms of like funding, but also just volunteers. You know, they know that from year to year, sometimes they struggle with getting people to help. You know, kind of goes up and down over time. So we know that. In terms of funding, we talked to the NDAs about the right scale for neighbor associations. none of our neighborhood associations are incorporated. They're not nonprofits. They're basically just a group of community members who get together and give as much time and energy as they can. And so the NDAs are kind of unsure how big should they grow their bank accounts, over time. Some NDAs think there's not enough funding, costs are going up, concerts, things that they like to do, much more expensive than they used to be. Whereas on the other hand, some of the NDAs have funding and they have a hard time kind of implementing a lot of the projects that they want to do. So their bank accounts just kind of grow. The ones that did say they wanted more funding, they think the $1,500 or $2,000 is probably a good kind of what they could probably use to do what they're currently doing. Some have tried to fundraise, some haven't. Some have been, somewhat successful with fundraising, but some haven't fundraised at all because they don't really need more money. Many NDAs can't do their own events. So there's one thing we definitely learned was there's a give and take every year. When folks come to them for funding, they're not sure how much to give them because they're not really sure what they're going to do later in the year. And so there's always a sort of give and take on sort of, we don't know how much we should give these groups because we're not sure what we're going to do, but we want to make sure we have our own funding. So sometimes the requests are reduced. Sometimes maybe they can't even do, some of the NDAs can't do what they would like to do because they're trying to give money to others as well. So there's a lot of that happens. The last part really is just our categories from 1980 are a little bit outdated, a little bit unclear, a little bit confusing. So the lump sum that we give the NDAs, we call it a grant, but it's really an allotment of money. The only grants that really occur are the ones that they give to the other community groups. All right. The other part that we learned was NDAs definitely value the ability to give others funding. We talked to them about, and since it sometimes is difficult, is that something that maybe we should consider not doing anymore? Definitely learned loud and clear that the NDAs would like to still support others. Some of the NDAs have different processes that they work through, so that's not always consistent. Applicants sometimes wonder, does my project qualify for funding? Does it not? There's a little bit of confusion there. And we don't really have a limit in terms of what can be asked for. So there's not, they don't really know what's reasonable when they come to the NDAs. They're kind of like, should I ask for 500 or should it be 1,000? So sometimes they even, do ranges. So those are quite a few things that we learned. Before we move on, I just want to give you a sense of so these are the sort of ending balances that we see in the final reports the last 5 years. So the median that was last year was about $5,000 in bank accounts, NDA bank accounts at the conclusion of the fiscal year. So we're not necessarily seeing them at the end of the year having zero funding. So some of the money's maybe been allotted to certain projects that they haven't done yet, things like that could happen, but this is generally what we've seen. And then the other part of the funding that we do give the NDAs is for insurance. So we buy, the city purchases insurance policies for each NDA annually. And we try to forecast kind of what they're going to do. We get the policies written, and as they do other events, we just add on to that as we go, if needed. So the median, 2023-24 policy was $555. So we're usually somewhere around the $4,000 range, $4,500 when it comes to the insurance policies. It really depends on what they do. I will say that the insurance companies are asking for more and more details every single year. It's a little more complicated. They want more dates, they want more attendance numbers, so that part has not been fun.
So Jason, before you go on, it's interesting. So
yeah,
when I look at who's got the high there, Hector Campbell, does that mean Hector Campbell has public events that are open to the public and say maybe some of the others don't?
Yeah, and I think Hector Campbell is also the community gardens on there.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a lot of activity that happens there, I think.
Okay, I got it. I was wondering why they were different.
I will say sometimes I'm surprised when sometimes certain events make the limits go up and others don't. Block parties are one. When they do a block party, I think insurance company looks at the street that they're on and they try to extrapolate. So it's interesting. Any other questions about that? All right. So what we have been looking at in terms of maximizing efficiencies and cost savings, we as a city, this has been in other conversations that you've had about events, is that starting next year, we're going to start since we're not doing Carefree Sunday anymore, we are going to put money towards Pride and Juneteenth and help them a little bit more than we have in the past. Those, the event organizers for those events are coming to the NDAs for funding every year. Hopefully with us helping them a little bit more, they don't need to necessarily go to the NDAs, and that might free up a little bit of dollars there for the NDAs. We're also looking at creating a new program for multicultural events and putting some funding there. So, right now we see all the groups going to the NDAs for funding every time they want to do something. And so what we're trying to do is hopefully reduce that need a little bit, which frees up hopefully a little bit of money for the NDAs. And the other thing we were looking at is potentially having our own city insurance cover the NDAs. Not sure if we're going to be able to do that or not at this point, but it is something that we're trying to look at. See if that could save up a little bit of money in that area as well.
What's currently happening, I mean, they're not under our citywide insurance policy, but Jason is procuring all those policies for them. So and then the data liability still sits with us. So we're exploring what might be possible and efficient from a fiscal standpoint.
So you're just trying to get some economies of scale?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to move to some of the proposed changes. So given what we learned, and these changes were presented to the NDAs in March, and basically came to an agreement with the leadership that these were good, and we tweaked them a little bit after our conversation. But so you're going to see the light blue areas are kind of the changes as I go through these slides. If you want to just pay attention to those areas, I know that's a lot of words out there. We're looking to change the NDA grant program to something called Milwaukie Neighborhood Enhancement Program. MNEP, I'm not exactly sure how we'll say it, but the part about how NDAs can lead projects, that wouldn't necessarily change, but we are looking to change and actually put a name to the grants that go to the community, calling them community connection grants. Because I think the purpose of them is to connect the NDA to the community. A few parts of that are, we discussed on what would be a reasonable limit on per grant per fiscal year from each NDA for a request. And we think that $500 is a good amount. Does not mean that an NDA couldn't give an organization more than 500, but just giving a little bit of a consistency and so these groups know when they come to the NDAs what they might expect. We're going to look at the process, definitely clear up the application forms that I'll be working on. One thing in the NDA grant program we've always asked is that there's some connection to the NDA when the NDA gives another group funding. I think in the application process, what we're going to do moving forward is actually ask the applicant that to make that connection and explain why that connection exists. And then, asking the groups to come back to the NDAs either by giving them a report or maybe, ideally maybe in person as a follow-up to see at the conclusion of the project that they're working on. The NDA helped with. The other part is just revising the categories. So currently we have what you see up there, but the new part for neighborhood organizing we would change to neighborhood capacity building initiatives, and basically it's simplifying the language a little bit and adding a little bit more information about diversity. You're going to kind of see through the four categories. We're adding a little bit of DEI into these. And hopefully, spelling that out, including these in here, that we can start to incorporate some of that into how we get this funding out as well. So this one basically is this category is essentially like how the NDAs run their meetings, equipment they might need, marketing and outreach, food and refreshments, things like that. The second one is we're not looking to change the name, but we're looking to neighborhood cultural, social, and recreational initiatives, so be activities, services, and materials that bring people together, community, and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, there's the DEI part that was not included in the past. The old description here had things like neighborhood computer labs. In 1998, that probably made a little more sense to us today. This category is probably the most used category in terms of, movies in the parks, concerts in the parks, picnics. All of those sorts of things fall into this category. The third one is physical improvements, not looking to change the name, but we want to spell out a little clearer materials and services to be used toward minor physical improvements approved by the city on publicly owned land. These are, in the past, it's been neighborhood entrance signs. There's a really old, that was when Lake Rose, they're looking to repaint that sign because it's falling apart, possibly redoing it. Minor park improvements, those sorts of things would fall into this category. And then the final one is probably the one that needs to be updated the most. It's called neighborhood preservation. What we're looking to change it to is neighborhood sustainability, resilience, and safety. Activities, materials, and services to support the neighborhood's ecological health and vitality or ability to prevent, withstand, and recover from the harmful impacts of natural hazards. This one included, quite a bit of stuff that we just have never really done through this program. And really the NDAs, we've seen a lot of, they want to support like this, community emergency response teams, good cleanups, beautification events, all the kind of sort of ecological, sustainability related kind of stuff. It's definitely something that's been really important to folks. All right. Is there any questions on those categories at all, or what I've described? Okay. I think I touched on the direct public benefit within NDA's boundaries. I don't really need to go over that in terms of like changes to the criteria. The other part of the criteria that we're looking to change is asking folks to, if they earmark money or set aside, allocate, however you want to say it, that the project should be achieved in 2 years or less. And if it's not, asking the NDAs to kind of talk about that funding again, kind of throw it back into the mix, and to, decide what is actually a priority now. Because what we've seen is sometimes this money gets earmarked and it just kind of lays there for quite a few years. And it just seems like some of those projects might not be achievable. And so that money just kind of never is opened up, for even new groups that come on board. You have the leadership team change and their priorities change and that sort of thing. So allowing that to happen a little bit more freely. The second part about reporting is, we talked about a scale, kind of what is the right scale. We think that if an NDA has more than $15,000, they shouldn't be eligible for another $4,000. That's over 3 years of funding that they haven't spent. And folks around the table, when we talked to them, they agreed that that's reasonable. And to be honest with you, most of them said they would love to have $15,000 because they haven't had that much money in their accounts for a long time. But just trying to find a scale that might work. And the last part I just want to mention was community connection grants in terms of, again, closing those loop between the NDAs that give the money out to folks and just making sure that there's a way that we can capture that. And I think what we're going to benefit from with that is also, when this was a matching program back in the day, we were able to track like all the volunteer time that this money created, and, the donations, and that, we'd make this report that says, well, we gave the NDAs X amount of dollars, but wow, look at all the benefit we got. It's really hard to do that now. We don't have a lot of like metrics. I'm hoping to sort of, and so we can, I guess, brag about it. This is one of the things we have, I think, for the NDAs that kind of like influence people to come and attend meetings and get involved, because there's a little money that's backing up people's goals. So hopefully we can improve that.
Jason, before you move on.
Yeah.
So at the top bullet there, I'm sorry, it's the second one below program criteria.
Yeah.
Projects designated to receive funding for a particular purpose must be achieved in 2 years or less. So this is the money that's going directly from the city to the NDA, not to the folks asking for connection grants.
Correct.
So when they get their money, do they submit, a program sheet? How do you know they didn't fulfill their purpose? I mean, what?
That's a good point. We asked the NDAs at the end of the year to give us a report, and it like itemizes kind of all of the things that they've done. What we're going to have to do a little more deliberatively, and honestly, I haven't revised the form yet, but I think what we're going to have to probably do is ask for the goal. So typically what we do is the year before we ask, if you have a certain amount of money left in your bank account, do you have goals for the next year? That's probably part of it. So I think we're just going to have to add a section that talks a little bit more about
Yeah, I have no objection to this, but I just think that there has to be
Yeah,
some, expectations on the city and the NDA's part about how you identify these projects and, and so that there's at least some level of measurement of whether they're achieved or not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll be one of these.
yeah, right. You're totally, I completely agree. I have to work on that. I think it's gonna be how I ask those questions within that final report. And there may be a need for sort of a beginning of the year report as well, potentially.
Well, I don't want to over-bureaucratize it, but I want something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested by the 15,000. Just felt good. I don't know. Because I will tell you that, frequently when we have discussions with the budget committee, the budget committee says, all this money and this bond, and you haven't done anything with it in 3 years. Why are we asking our city residents to pay for this? We're not using it. And so, that's 3 years plus.
Yeah. I think it is more of a gut feeling, to be honest with you. And I think when I looked at kind of like balances that we typically see, like if I go back.
Yeah.
Really the highest amount I've seen is probably around the 15,000. So I think that was part of it too. It was kind of like,
That's right. I think it's gut based on those historical balances and really seeing when things are, I mean, that the top you're seeing there is that 15. And I think that what we've heard from the NDAs that do accrue up to that amount is that they may be saving up for sort of a capital like improvement. But this is where the 2-year limit comes
Okay,
in.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Because, you may take a couple years for it to accrue so that you have enough to do that. But this is a 5-year.
Well, you want some flexibility, you want some reserves,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I wouldn't want all the NDAs to be carrying a balance of 50K every year.
Right.
right. And we've seen a few times where NDAs have saved up, like 10,000 is probably the amount that I've seen, like Wichita Park, Linwood donated $10,000. Long time ago, Lake Road donated money for the track at the school many years ago. It was like $10,000. So it seems like when they want to save up for like a big thing, it's about 10. I will say we're going to try this. So none of this, so I'm going to talk to you about like the next steps, and it's going to be a resolution. The amounts won't be in there in terms of this. This is more of like administrative policy. And so I think after the next year or two, take a revisit, kind of see how it's working. Do these amounts make sense at that point? I think we'll have to revisit.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let me get to that last slide. I just wanted to. So really the next steps are revising the policy and criteria, the application material, working on that, reporting forms, and then a new resolution that kind of replaces that 1998 one with some of this new language. And so the current program won't change this year, but the goal is to have it starting next fiscal year with these new name and the new forms and all the stuff. So.
I was interested in the section on what you can't spend money on.
Okay.
And I thought it was well thought out. As I remember, and I apologize, I don't have the staff report in front of me, is that there was one that said debts for services and legal, which I understand, but kind of going back to what Shane Abner tells us from time to time, I would like plainer language that says, you can spend money on legal services.
Yeah.
Because there's a bit of interpretation in a little bit, it's just clearer rather than saying legal debt.
Sure. Just any legal services would not be covered by the NDA.
And I don't want to quibble over the exact wording, but I just, I took to heart what Shane told us. He spent a lot of time trying to get Metro to speak in plain language, so. Anyway, that's just an observation.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
I like when folks look at that section because I've looked at it way too many times. So others looking at it probably, it's a good idea. I'll ask Justin for plain language, but, well, we'll see if we can get plain language. But, yeah. Does anyone have any other thoughts or about anything that?
I mean, I appreciate the works that's on your part and the leadership of the MBAs. Because I think that some of the things that have come through as just kind of growing pains in the last several years are reflected now. It's that is not. So, yeah, I mean, I think, like some of the things that come to mind for me are, what modifications could be made to the application forms and things. I don't know if it makes sense for us to get into the weeds that far. But I think this is a really good direction. I also really appreciate and I think it's a good direction for us to be thinking about as events become so large that they are a benefit to the entire community, then what that looks like for the city to contribute. And so I appreciate that we're beginning with Pride and Juneteenth, and I think that there are some other kind of cherished events that might soon meet that threshold. So I appreciate that this is the direction that we're moving in. I think that will take some of the pressure off of the, granting program in the NDAs.
Yeah, hopefully. For sure.
We heard a lot from the NDA leadership and from the Equity Steering Committee that one of the real values is the community connection element of the NDAs being able to provide grants. On the flip side, particularly when we think of events with an equity focus or a multicultural focus, there's an inequity in asking communities like that haven't had the resources to put things on to go to 7 NDAs to kind of scrape together $50 here, $100 here, and that just really flies against our DEI values. So I think that this strikes that balance of keeping the door open for that NDA community connection, but also recognizing that we can alleviate some of that burden by providing direct multicultural support.
Yeah, and I just, I said that I didn't want to go in the weeds about the application, but one thing that does come to mind is on the application form, I think it would be kind of helpful to say, like, have you already approached, just kind of have check boxes of which NDAs have you already approached or have plans to about this project. That sometimes comes up in conversation with the applicants.
Right.
And so then that might actually just eliminate that uncomfortable moment.
It's just a full transparency issue.
Yeah.
And it helps, if you're not able, like sometimes we would be at the end of the process and that coincided with the, the scale up of summer events or something. So we felt really bad not being able to, to offer, but knowing that they had gone and been successful in other NDAs, is important.
Yeah, I think one of our conversations that we're going to try to incorporate is a sense of like, if we didn't give you this funding, like where else are you getting the, are you going to be able to pull off your goals? Or what is the amount that you absolutely need, or what other, where else are you getting funding from? Because I think sometimes they don't have a good sense of that. Either it's like, if we don't give you this, does that mean it's not going to happen at all? Or, if we give you a smaller amount, is it still going to be something? I have my work cut out for me to improve these a little bit, but I think through this whole process, the spirit of the NDA, of the grant program that we've had for 26 years is still live on, still empowering the NDAs to make their own decisions and spend this money in the way that they want to spend it, which I think is pretty awesome. You don't really see a lot of cities doing this. So.
Jason, I just want to echo what Rebecca has mentioned, is that I really appreciate the effort that you went through to work with the NDAs, because even if it was a good idea, if it just came out of City Hall and was handed to the NDAs, it just wouldn't go over as well as they're being listened to and considered in the whole process. And I know that takes time, and so I appreciate that.
All right, and I just want to echo and add my thanks. Jason's a treasure to the city of Milwaukie. How many years now, if you add the 2 times you've been here?
14 and a half.
14 and a half. So, yeah, and this single project is great evidence of how thoughtful you are and just the tremendous relationships you built with all of our neighborhoods. And so I'm really appreciative of everything you do.
Thanks.
All righty.
Before we go on to the next topic, just for the benefit of the public, let me highlight 2 changes to the work session agenda for this evening. Originally, the supervisory control and data acquisition, which is a public works project, is going to be discussed. But one of the most important members of the city staff cannot be here tonight, so that's been removed from the agenda. It'll be rescheduled at a future date. And we had scheduled for the regular session an information presentation about the digital radio update. This is a Clackamas County wide project, and so we've moved that from the regular session to this work session.
And I think that's what we're on now. So come on up, folks. Swap.
Okay. Thank you, councilors. City Manager Sager, appreciate it, your time. My name is Ryan Burdick. I'm the police chief here at Milwaukie Police Department. And with me is Mark Buckholz. He's the executive director at the Washington County Communications Agency, or WACA. So the C-800 is a very large digital infrastructure project. It was first passed by a bond measure in 2016, Measure 3476. And essentially, it was getting rid of a dead technology, or a technology that was going away, which was analog, converting everything to digital. There's some 2,500 plus police, fire, EMS, radio users within Clackamas County. And this was creating or upgrading some approximately 24 radio sites. So this was a very significant project. Milwaukie was one of 19 participating user agencies within Clackamas County. In about April of 2022, the project manager at the time, John Hartsock, announced that the project was over budget by several $1 million. So that started a significant kind of ripple effect where everyone had to react to these additional expenses and costs. There was a variety of reasons for this. The wildfires, supply chain issues, inflation, some cost overruns. There were several issues that came up to create this kind of perfect storm of expenses. Traditionally in Milwaukie, our portion of these expenses was usually in the $30,000 range. In 2023, we paid out about $112,000, $52,000 for radios, and then we did a cost sharing as one of the 19 users within Clackamas County of about $59,000. Clackamas County dedicated, looks like $2 million of ARPA funds to help alleviate this budgetary issue. But the problems are still there. There's still expenses that need to be accounted for. There is some good news. The project is nearing completion, but there are added expenses that we're still trying to account for to get the project overall into the correct financial condition. Mark Buckholz took over as project manager after Johnson Hartsock left the project. And he can get into the weeds a little bit better on some of the issues that have come up in the past, and then where we're going in the future. And essentially, it looks like one of the ways to account to get this project back to the right financial condition is the user fees from the radios will be increased slightly from amongst all the users within Clackamas County. So that's kind of the brief overview. There's more to it, but so we can certainly start with any comments or questions.
I can share a little about the money if you want.
That's
So-
kind of what I'm curious to know how it.
Yeah, so first I'll go with what's a connection. So I'm the executive director of what the chief indicated is what we affectionately call WACA, which is the Washington County 911 Center. And for the connection is that the radio system that was built in Clackamas County, this whole bond measure project, was actually a multi-county effort. So Washington County, we put out a bond measure as well, upgraded, changed to digital, put in new sites, increased coverage. Same thing occurred in Clackamas, and so did portions of Yamhill County, so Newburgh, Dundee. It is actually one big regional system. So a police officer, firefighter, ambulance service, they can actually drive anywhere in that entire range beyond one big radio system. From that perspective, we certainly have an interest in success and making sure the entire infrastructure stays intact and in good shape. And we have for quite some time, I have a fairly good-sized radio staff, both facility staff and radio team, 6 techs, take care of radios, the infrastructure at the sites. We just basically have been that maintenance level. And the Clackamas, what you've referred to as C800 is the 19 agencies in Clackamas County who formed the ORS 190. They hired an outside project manager, which the chief mentioned, and then they contracted with us to take care of the maintenance of the stuff on the ground, the radio sites, the towers, the roads, all that stuff. So that's our connection. And along came the situation, which was actually sprung on everybody, that the project was a multi-million-dollar over budget in April of 22, which of course upsets a whole lot of people when something like that happens. And so there was a handful of months of trying to figure out what's really going on, what had happened, how did this happen. The chief mentioned the fires. The fires was really the beginning catalyst, but there were 2 key components of this project that made a financial problem. I say 2 key. You realize as we had delays of COVID and the ability to get work, we were also paying more money for each labor contract we were putting out. So as the project got delayed for results of the fire, we had to shut down operations on the east side because of the fire. We were delayed. Contracts had to be renegotiated, getting labor to do the work, to do the road construction, to pull power. A lot of those things cost more money. So there was a component in there, nowhere near multi-million dollars, that resulted in cost overruns, but that's kind of one of the things that happened. With that, there was work that was done by a contractor, and that work a lot of that work had been damaged by the recovery of the fires. So areas out 224, Highway 224, we have 3 big radio sites out in that area, and they had already they put equipment on the sites, they pulled power, and a lot of that had been damaged by the equipment that was contracted and come in to clean up after the fire. We were off limits, so there's work that had to be redone. I began the beginning of not well understanding where the finances were. From everything we've learned since, by the way, then summer of 22, the C800 board asked us at WACA if we would just take over 100% manage the project forward and figure out what happened, how did it happen, and how do we get straightened out? And so we prepared the first budget for C800 last year. And so that invoice in the back of your packet that talks about those per total for the cost of the city of Milwaukie was $112,000. We had gone through the numbers, we had looked at every contract we were provided and everything we were aware of to figure out, and came up with a determination that C800 was over budget by roughly 4 million, 4.1 million. That was our best estimate at the time. That's a year and a half ago when we started this effort. Now we have a much better handle on the situation, but at that point we were at a $4 million overrun on I want to say $40-50 million project. So it's a fair chunk of money. So the solutions we looked at to solve the financial problem, this is just on the capital project. To handle that 4 million, we reached out to the county. County said, well, here's what we can do. We can help with ARPA funds, as the chief mentioned. That was a $2 million solution. The city of Lake Oswego in this entire network, we had 2 more sites. We should have had 24 in total, but we couldn't. I say we in the form, I wasn't here. I'm just the story of how it went. We couldn't get approval from permitting to build 2 sites in the city of Lake Oswego. While they were needed for coverage, the community said, those towers are ugly, we don't want them. So they didn't get built. We already bought the equipment, so we're left with a boatload of equipment that should fill up 2 sites. And they just said, no, there's nothing we can do. So a C800 group said, well, what can we do with this equipment? And we need money, can we unload it? And so we worked to come to an agreement between Motorola, who had already sold it to us. Now we have this issue that we bought something that's really new, but it's used. How are we going to work that out? Columbia County is in the process of wanting to build and replace their really difficult shaped system that they have. And so it's a possibility. And we brokered a rough price for them if they could make it work of just shy of $1,900,000. So of our $4 million debt, that became the third component to get us close to the $3 million, and we still had $1 million to deal with. Now, we've held the equipment. Columbia County hasn't reached their ability to purchase, get approval, complete everything that they're going to do. So it's still an item we're concerned about, and we're hoping that it comes through and it gets taken care of. But in the meantime, we have to prepare in case it does not. We do have some feelers out for some other communities that are in the radio construction business. They need new digital equipment that we have. So we're looking for some backup options there. The last part of that, $1,140,000, which is the remainder to get to that $4 million. We went and didn't have an option. And so to be able to pay those bills, we did a one-time assessment of all the members based on the ratio that you are a member. So the size of Milwaukie as a member, paid an amount, and on that invoice, you would have seen a description of 2 items. Thank you, Chief. So you got the partner fee assessment and the regular annual maintenance. The budget overrun assessment was $59,000. That was Milwaukee's share. And then all the other 19 agencies, the larger the agency, the more their share was. They brought that 1.1 million together. So that came in this year. And that set up the situation to take care of the capital. Now I say take care of it. So where we're at today is it's taken care of with an assumption that we're able to sell the surplus equipment for $900,000. If we don't sell that, it's an item we still have to deal with. And we have a couple of plans on how to deal with that, but we just need to buy some time right now to see if Columbia can come through or a couple of other entities that are looking at radio equipment. The other half of the equation here is that the project went forward with never recognizing or talking about or acknowledging that if you take 9, 10, 11 sites and you go to 22, you're going to have an operational expense. It's going to significantly increase from what you've been used to in years past. And that was never factored in to handle that cost. And, for every single site, we have dual microwave into each of those sites. We have roads we have to maintain, HVAC systems to maintain. We've got to fuel and power those sites with, backup power for generators. All those things cost money. You add all those sites, the maintenance of those every year are going to cause the user fees to go up. So when you look at user fees, forget the capital portion. Your user fees that were in the 30,000 range, as an example for the city of Milwaukie, we double the size of the system. We should have been anticipating that the user fees on the annual basis to share the maintenance are going to be around 60,000, just from the simplistic doubling in size of our operation. So that's where we're at right now. We have established pretty clear, we're wrapping up, the last of the completion was done on the last radio site, so the core construction's done. We're in the closeout phases of all the contracts that existed with C800, making sure that all the work that a vendor was to do meets the contract, or paid, cleared, and it looks like we've got that under control. The proposed fees for next year are roughly 13% increase. So it's still a chunk of an increase, but our belief is, with the exception of that $900,000 of equipment, with the exception of that, we look forward to just a standard cost of expenses increases like you'd have in anything else in the projected 5 years out. We've created a 5-year forecast to look at all the items that need to be taken care of. And so I'm hoping and expecting that unless something catastrophic happens, we'll stabilize those costs. The city will be in that, I would expect, in the 60,000 range for the share. And again, the one item, 1,000 down. That said, that's where we're at. That's the budget we're moving forward with. The plan that we're moving forward with. A secondary item is we've gone through all the paperwork of every contract, what the contract amounts were, what the approved charges were, and we've discovered one contract that appears that the billings were well in excess of the authorized contract. That's a side item, but it is an item that we don't think got handled properly. We've reached out to the vendor and they say, no, we did what we were supposed to, we charged what we were supposed to, it's all good. I get their opinion, but that's not our opinion. We've recommended to the board to pursue a legal effort in this because I think that is what I think. Me and my team, we feel that the cost that was paid for certain work that was done is well above what it should have been. But it occurred over so many years, and the tracking by the accounting that was done didn't clearly display it. I think if it would have, somebody would have called timeout long before April of 22. But that being said, I only mention that because there is a possibility down the road, there is some positive news and there is some cost recovery that would actually offset the issue we're worried about. And I am talking about a dollar amount that is larger than the amount we're hoping to sell the equipment for. With that, that's what I can share about what we're doing, what's going on, and hopefully we've got things under control. It'll be stabilized and moving forward. There won't be surprises like there was in the last 18 months.
Well, Mark, let me say thank you for taking over, on what is your traditional role as a maintenance organization and sustainment organization to a major acquisition. And it sounded like handed a full bag of good news. And so I really am appreciative of that because it hasn't been your day job, I don't think.
It's not.
So I guess my question is, I don't even know if you can answer this, but I mean, what does the county or the region learn from this?
Okay, that's a great question. I can't really speak to what we've learned. I mean, I learned a ton of stuff every day when we're dealing with this. And one of the things that I know in our operation, we deal with the 5-year forecast. There's something I'll tell you, if we learn anything, is not to do a year-to-year budget without having a 5-year forecast. Every time you do a year budget, you're adding up the forecast and you're tracking everything you owe and what you believe you're gonna owe and what you're gonna need to replace. It is very easy, and that's a problem. I think my frustration with our auditor is our auditor, they audited 1 year at a time. And they continue to tell the board, you're in good shape, everything looks good. But when they look at a window of 1 year at a time, they don't look at all the debt you've accumulated, they're not focused on all those things. We didn't hire them to do that either, but that is the thing. If I was to take away an item is to have recognized that all along. Every single contract we let, that dollar amount gets recognized on a single big spreadsheet. And actually the majority of I actually used a long time, I've known Toby LaFrance for a long time. And when we got into this, I actually, a year ago, asked the chief, hey, can we get a little help? And he said, oh, our finance manager is Toby. Oh, I know Toby. Look at the books, look at this stuff, tell me what you think. And there was some display of money in a way that I would never display. And the auditor chose to do something that I think allowed the board to think they had money. And I was mentioning the chief earlier. In this big, huge project, there was capital money, and the worry of the impact to the users for the maintenance of this huge capital infrastructure. 10 years of maintenance was prepaid to the biggest vendor, Motorola. And it was using capital money, and it prepaid it $6 million prepayment for the next 10 years, so the members wouldn't have to pay it. The bad part is that $6 million went on the books. That's fund balance. So if you saw a document, you looked at it, you go, oh, what's going on? And I see at the bottom, well, we got 6 plus, added, if we did have fund balance, plus that 6 million, we got plenty of money. This isn't a problem. So if somebody's telling you we're in great shape, you're gonna go, oh, I believe that. I think that 6 million on the books made board members see money and think they had money because they didn't. I think there's another item. If I've heard anything, I wouldn't allow it to be displayed that way just because it gives a wrong sense of how much money you have. Those are just my guesses about what anyone learned.
I'm sorry, let me ask one other question who was responsible for this? I mean, was it the county? Was it a committee of the various counties? Was it a hired contract program manager? I'm trying to get my arms around.
Right, at the core, a hired contract manager. Okay.
Who was hired by the county board, correct?
Hired by C800.
Hired by SCADA.
The county managed the bond, but they really managed the bond in the sense that the hired project manager told them, here's an expense, it's related to the project, it's due for reimbursement, they authorize reimbursement. The county did not require all of the contracts that were left to be, all those dollar amounts to be shared with them, so they had I don't think they did. That part of it is really outside my purview when I think about, I don't really know what they did. I appreciate the basic support of the other funds. Okay, world of difference.
Yeah. So where does accountability fall into all this? Because by the looks of it, small town Milwaukee is being held accountable. So other places are being held accountable for these errors. So where does C800 digital radio move next on accountability? Right now it's on the taxpayer. They already did their half.
Well, the C800 radio group actually is It's 19 members. There isn't anything more.
Right, there's people within those leadership positions within that group, right?
On a given year, you mean, so the board, so if there's 18 or 19 members and there's a board.
The auditor, these individuals that play a role in this, where does that accountability come from? Where are they held accountable? Where are these mistakes? Because it just doesn't sit well with me, especially when the taxpayers already approved the bond measure. I mean, these are repetitive issues we keep hearing about with projects that get passed through taxpayer dollars. And there's never accountability. The accountability always ends up falling on the taxpayer once again. And it's difficult because we're in a budget crunch right now, you know, and $30 for us counts. You know, that's money that could be funding something else that we need, or could go towards something else, or a staff person, or, you know, there's a various number of things. These things are hard pills to swallow, especially when there's a lack of answers on not on you by all means, but just in general, it astonishes me that there's never accountability is never filled, right? And there's never fulfillment on that, and you know. So my other question is this: if you can't sell that equipment for $900,000, is there going to be another round of disbursement that's going to be divided between all 19 of us again? We're going to have to come out of pocket again for that to make up that shortfall. Is that one of the options?
That is one of the options. Yes. Right now, we're looking to buy time to try to sell the equipment and buy time to try to figure out if there's a possible recovery on what appears to be an overpayment. And as that time, trying to buy time to solve that component, guaranteed 100%, that's really where we're at right now. And trying to look for expenses that we know we're going to have to see if there are options to alternatively fulfill those expenses. We have 2 generators at Timberline that need to be replaced. They are part of the overall plan and budget. They're $200,000 to totally replace that. There's requirements we have with in-ground tanks, and it basically makes that an expensive venture. We are searching out right now grant opportunities to see if we can handle that project. The county is reaching to see if they have excess ARPA dollars to allow that item to be handled through that funding mechanism to basically reduce that 900,000 to 700,000. And there are a couple of other things that are coming along the pipes where grant opportunities are things that we might be able to negotiate. We're also looking at, some of our sites are very attractive to private companies, cellular companies, for different reasons. So trying to pursue some leasing of space to recover some more money, again, to bring that dollar amount down. They're hard, they take time to figure out. It takes the right moment. You have to have the right site in place that somebody wants to, that they don't already have coverage in, those kinds of things. Those are our avenues right now, and they just take time. And so that's, rather than, wanting to make it clear to everyone, this is not done. We have this $900 rate we got to worry about. But rather than putting out an expense and a large capital, everybody pay their share now. We can buy some time, hold off, and try to resolve that without doing that. The reverse would be just assess it now, pay it off, and if that comes in later, then reduce fees in the future. I mean, that's really the balance. But trying to hold the costs once we get over this hump here, to hold them level with the just your annual, whatever the CPI is. And I'm fighting right now. We have, out of the 22 sites, I'm spending over $100,000 in electricity. And when I get the bad news and PGE goes, hey, we just went to the PUC and raised your rate 17%. I'm thinking of each of you going, oh my God, those kinds of things, those are big worries. And I know we just hear it. They just go, hey, we went to the PUC, we need more money, we've got 70% increase. And be for our operation because of the amount of power draw we have at all of our sites. And so trying to manage each of those items along the way to try to get us to a point where there's no big surprise. And we know this one's out there. I feel it's manageable, and of course, if we can find solutions, we have a trade-off right now. The longer we wait to get rid of this equipment, the older it gets, the less valuable it is. You know, it's like having a car sitting in the garage, just getting older. So we're pushing to, but can't push, you know, when another community is trying to make a decision, you can't move them along. They got to get there or they don't. And so that's kind of what we're.
My last question, just sifting through all this, in your opinion, did you see any safeguards that could have been put in place to prevent some of these things? Aside from like the fires and stuff, obviously, but like some of the.
Oh, yeah, I would have never.
Not to get you in trouble.
The fiscal management, I would have never let it be the way it was. I don't think folks even realized how it was. They believed we had a contract accountant, which we do. C800 has no employees. It's 19 members. They're an ORS 190. They're an entity, and they contract to a project manager, and the rest we pay out contract. And we contract with C800 contracts with WACA. That's why I'm here. But we have an accountant, and then the project was done by a separate person who was just reporting to the project manager, never directly to the board. I would never let that. It's just a problem waiting to happen. We never have to say that. That's just, and the accountant who did the best job they could, there was nothing wrong with the accounting that was done for the money and the exposure they had, which was just every invoice that came through the system about the contracts. And you had an auditor who audited that. There's nothing wrong with any of the audits. Nothing came up incorrect. But because those books were done separately, there was no exposure to the real liability that was out there. And if there was, somebody would have said, hey, wasn't that contract $3 million and haven't we paid him $4 million? Doesn't that seem like there's a problem? Somebody should have said that. That didn't happen because that visibility wasn't there.
I appreciate that.
Sorry if I'm saying too much.
No, I appreciate it. Honestly.
And Mark has done a tremendous job trying to pick the pieces up of this project. I mean, this was incredibly complicated, occupies vast amounts of time. And, you know, a big multi-year project all over the county during some of the most difficult years, COVID, wildfires, inflation, is just, yeah, it was very good.
Perfect stuff.
Councilor Stabenow, would you have any questions or comments?
I do. You'd mentioned, in addition to the new base payment for the city, or for our city,
The city of
the
Milwaukie.
terminology that you used, that there was a percentage for annual addition. Do you know what that percentage?
We projected in the 5-year forecast, we just projected at 5% for the out years. 13.2 is the overall average for everyone. The city of Milwaukie may be a little higher or lower because the rate model that the C800 uses is per radio. So when radios go up or down, it adjusts a little bit. But 13.2 is this year. And then from then on, it is 5-year projection. And those are based on the 5-year projection of all the costs and the contracts that we have and all that stuff in the future. Obviously, if we drop down and CPI is 2, and then we'll be making adjustments a little bit down. It turns out CPI is 7.8 or whatever, like a year and a half ago. Then things they're going to go up. But that's what we're projecting right now. 5% in the out years. 13.2 is the one imminent here on July 1 of 2024.
And then you had mentioned 2 generators outside Timberline. Is that the next major capital expenditure?
Yes.
And you said 200,000, is that per generator or is it?
No, that's for the whole project. We have dual generators, so if one fails, we got the other one to keep the system online. Yeah, that's the entire project. We're on forest land property. There are whole lot of hoops we gotta go through to get things done and do it the way they want, and there's in-ground, we're up on the ski lift, so there's it is a complicated site, which puts, a normal generator would be $100,000 at another site, but because it's timberline, our estimate's 198 or 196 right now, and that is with an expectation that we do it within the next 2 years. And we, looking for solutions. Right now, the county is aware of that. Searching, they have an entire program, and a lot of that stuff is underway. Once in a while, some of those projects can't get completed, and then there's some money left over, and then they need a short, fast opportunity to get something done under the window. So we are sitting, hoping that whatever goes wrong for somebody else will allow that opportunity in the summer, because our hands are tied. We have a 90 to 120 day window that we have to do the entire project. So we either get a chance here in the next 90 days to know it's a go, or we have to wait a year, just because we can't do the work at Timberline unless it's in that little window.
Is the cost for that plan to be spread across the whole district?
Yeah, all of the expense at any individual site are shared with all the members, as the radio system is treated as a system, so no one is on the hook for an individual site by
Is that
itself.
factored into the 5-year projection already?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's factored in 2 years out, and so we move it up. If we move it up, an opportunity for a bond or grant or an opportunity, if that comes up, we'll move the project up. We know it's a risk. Those are the oldest generators in the fleet. But the fact that there are 2 of them, we know if one fails, we can at least run the next one long enough to see if we can at least patch the first one together. But it is not, we put it off 2 years. For the same reason I was mentioning other things, we're trying to put things off a little bit to see if we can solve this $900,000 problem. So, yeah.
And if that, so you mentioned that litigation or that path for litigation. If that outcome is positive, then if you're able to recoup the contractual overage, does that get spread across the district as well? Or do you anticipate that would be directed,
It'll work out.
I'm kind of wondering if the organization is as robust as to have reserves or budget lines.
It'll be, for me, it becomes an opportunity doing one of those things. So it'll, depending on what the dollar amount is, and then we'll go to the C800 board and say, okay, you have some options. We can either take it and return the money, or we can take it and pay off, or we can hold it in reserve for future things and lower the user fees, or hold them steady. I mean, there's a bunch of options of what to do if that positive time comes.
Sure.
Yeah, so, and if that works out, then I'd be talking to the board, here's the options, look at this, which way do you want to go, how do you want to handle it, how does it pick? And so the chief would be one of those people who are listening to that option and trying to weigh in what's better, what's going to impact the city of Milwaukie better. Is it, we need to hold the rate same, would we be better to pay off, would we be better to put a reserve to make sure that we don't have any super thing go wrong, we get tower struck by lightning, and we've got a big expense to deal with or something like that. But those are the general decisions if we have income like that.
I guess I'm also kind of curious about the role that FEMA reimbursement plays.
Well, they could have played a role
That's what I was wondering.
if somebody would have, I think there was enough, I wasn't here and I wasn't involved. But it's really unfortunate the amount of expense we incurred because of the damage caused directly related to the recovery of the fire and no application to FEMA.
So that's a piece that is just a continual issue of mine. The Clackamas County Board does not apply traditionally for FEMA reimbursements or for ice storms, natural disasters. And the narrative that's pushed forward is this, community resiliency. We don't need it, we take care of our own. But what in actuality happens is that we are all taking care of it by paying more when we could have received federal reimbursement for the emergencies that we've all experienced.
I should clarify when I say this. There wasn't any reimbursement from FEMA. I don't know if somebody pursued that and found out it didn't qualify. That part I really don't know. If somebody did take the initiative and we didn't qualify. I just know there was no reimbursement. I know there's a fire and there are a lot of people who did get reimbursed. So it feels like we might have missed something, but I don't really know.
I appreciate that, and it's a nuanced process, and I understand it's a really heavy lift sometimes. There's a lot of reporting, which is part of the reason why cities our size, sometimes it's not worth the application process. But for Clackamas County to be able to apply on behalf of cities and hopefully, pay down an instance like this where, it comes back to us anyway. So anyway, I just needed to stand on that soapbox for a minute, because I think when the next emergency comes around and we have an opportunity to have a voice in that communication with the county and encourage them to apply, then I think this is a really good example of how it could be beneficial.
I certainly get that. Like I'd say is I'm super happy that the county came through with $2 million in ARPA funding, so.
We won't roast them with your name.
Okay, thanks. I'll see you later. Because I want that generator.
It's a good thing that the ARPA funding was available and that there's flexibility and, it's great, but it would have been great and.
So Chief, are you our representative to the C800 board?
Yes.
And Mark and Chief, I have a quick question on, I'm over here, I found the c800.org website, and ironically, the last news update was January of 2022. And so I'm just wondering, you heard kind of a theme in the questions around accountability, a theme about the complications in our budget process. Do you know, Mark, is there a plan for, I know you said the C800 group is sort of, there aren't any employees of it, but is there a plan for any communication with the public about this from this group, or is?
I don't have any plan.
Yeah.
And I know, I'm just trying to take it. I know the website hasn't had much update. That was, it has not been my priority.
I understand, completely
It's,
understand.
I've tried to get the board minutes are out there, the board meetings out there, who's on the board, and the rest of that stuff is just, has just sat. It's, we like to take better care of that as we move forward, but,
Oh, I know you've been busy, and
one thing at a time.
I was so not trying to call you out. It was
It's
more,
okay.
I so appreciate you coming here tonight to give our council and our community an update, and I'm just was, curious if there were plans on any sort of other public messaging around the current state of the program.
Personally, no plan by me, except, I will and we will, my team will get to updating that and trying to give updates as things are progressing with what's going on with the C800 on the website. But it's a hard thing to describe and message to anyone without providing a ton of information and writing a story on what happened.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to figure out what's the right thing to do there.
Well, again, we really appreciate you taking the time to educate us.
And through the chief, if you have any questions, he can always get a hold of me and he can get something answered to you. You hear something or through the grapevine, something's weird, what's going on, he can find me, get you the answers you need.
Thanks again.
We have a very brief budget update and a budget question. and Scott, if Scott can come on up.
Mess up the camera
You're supposed to
coverage.
stick your head in
Is it- I'm just wondering, because I'm always trying to figure out
Where the,
who am I looking. Oh, okay.
so we know we've been talking to your office about it. We are going to give you a whole nother process overview tonight. We wanted to do two things. One was just, again, where we're about a week and a half out from the start of our Saturday budget meeting series. So I want Michael to just share sort of what to expect on the 27th, answer any final questions you have about that process and the milestones to come. And then the second thing, and the reason Scott's up here, is council is one of the departmental budgets in our budget book. You're pretty easy, you're pretty straightforward and cut and dry, and you know it's a hold the line year. One of the line items in council's budget in the last biennium was $10,000 for lobbying, and we have not had a discussion with you about if you would like to keep that budget in as we put the final touches on the draft proposed budget to show you on the 27th. So let's first start with Michael on just what the road to the 27th and what the day of the 27th is going to look like.
Okay, so so to start this week, we're gonna send out on Friday kind of an agenda, which is gonna have the Q3 budget report. That's usually what we go through and talk about in the budget meetings. We're sending that out beforehand, trying to give you guys, we're trying to maximize our time in these meetings. So by sending you out this on Friday, it shows where we're at through 3/4 of fiscal year 2024. And if you have any questions on that next week, feel free to reach out, email me, let me know. But with that information, on the 27th, we'll start just by doing a brief overview of that, and any big topics that come out, we can all discuss as a group. The meeting starts at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m., you'll get your budget binder, which is the official budget that we're proposing. Also on that date, there's 3 budgets that we kind of go through and look at. There's the City of Milwaukie, there's the Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission, the MRC. And then there's also a meeting that's for shared state revenue. And our plan is to on that 27th meeting, to have the state shared revenue meeting as well. That usually takes a half hour or so. That's usually a less conversation, but it's a formality that we have to show that we've had that meeting. From there, we can answer any questions. Emma will give her state of the city speech at that point from the city manager point of view. I'll be there to kind of walk through any initial questions you have. And then on May 4th is kind of the big heavy lift day. We're starting at 9 a.m. then. And all the directors will come in at that point and come in and talk to you about kind of a roadshow, 10 minutes of what their budget is, what significant projects or significant expenses they had in the year, and kind of have the opportunity for you guys to ask them any questions. As we all know, we've been in the hold the line budget this year, so a lot of them is just the same as it was 2 years ago. And then there's a third meeting that we have tentatively scheduled on May 11th. And I think this year we're going to need that third meeting to just have a discussion on where the budget is, what the 5-year forecast is, and ways we want to look at looking at revenue sources, or looking at expense, or what changes or anything that you guys want us to make in the budget. The third meeting we'll start at 10, and I know that we're limited in communication that we can have before then, but I think we need the third. It's kind of my brief overview, but if there's any questions or anything you have in anticipation, I know all three of you are new to the process.
Michael, what are your desired outcome?
Get a realistic budget. I don't think we can solve all the problems that are coming down. I think that there's always been this kind of out cliff in year 5, but I think I'm looking for something that's realistic so that we don't have to come back throughout the year and make supplementals, something that we can hold ourselves to for the next 2 years, and also something that we're aware of in the next biennium. We've got to make changes and just make sure everybody's aware and on that page that it's not a sustainable track that Sorry, that was a little too honest, but following the C800 discussion.
Couldn't get any worse, right?
Yeah. I think the problems that are facing we don't face this alone. I think everybody's facing this. And I think bringing it to light and having the discussion, the earlier we can, the better.
And perhaps a low-hanging fruit question for you to put on is the last probably 3 or 4 fiscal years, it's not a terribly old line in the council budget, but $10,000 per fiscal year, so 20 in a biennium, has been designated as available to hire a lobbyist. And previous council members, including current Mayor Beatty and former Mayor Gamba, have been a part of those conversations about, there was a council agreement that was something that the city wanted to be a part of. There's different forms that lobbying efforts can take, and I'm no expert. There are others in the room, and we've had others on council and staff before who are way more knowledgeable about that, but $10,000 per year has been set aside for that. I took a look back on how we actually have been spending that, and I think most of the city's lobbying in the last 4 or 5 years has been done through the Metro Mayors Consortium, and there is an annual membership dues for that we pay for, that the city council has covered. But for whatever various reasons, the decision had not been made to go out and do what other cities have done and hire a lobbyist. I'm guessing $10,000 a year doesn't probably get you a lot of lobbyist time, and you probably have to have a relatively focused agenda in terms when you go to the lobbyist. So there's a conversation there about what we do with the lobbyist. But I think today our relatively, hopefully simple question is, 3 members of council that are present today, is there still interest in leaving those resources in your budget for the next biennium to hire a lobbyist? And is $10,000 the number that you would expect to see there or be comfortable leaving there? Or what are your thoughts on lobbyists?
So you're saying that the Metro Mayors Consortium dues are part of that 10,000 or in addition to the 10,000?
That 10,000 covers it. The number 3,500 a year is what I'm thinking is what it covers, and that has in the past, I think Metro Mayors, Mayor Gamba would share reports from the Thorn Run group. So that, I believe, is the lobbying that we got for the bang for the buck so far.
It comes from that line item. And do our LOC dues, are they in another area?
They're in another area.
Okay.
And I forget what that falls under. I don't think it's the council budget. I could be wrong about that, but this is
Possibly city manager.
possibly city manager. But this is independent of the LLC
Okay.
funding.
Well, my opinion is to keep it there. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I mean, I also feel a little uncomfortable changing course drastically with only 3/5 of our council here.
Yeah, I want to keep it there, but I will tell you that, we just need to look in the mirror and, city council is probably guilty of things we tell other people to do. And that is, tell the NDAs to give us a goal, and spend your money on achieving those goals and, within 2 years. And so I think we need to raise the visibility on this somehow, because I think that there's, again, it's not a lot of money, but, in a very, well-defined scope, it might work out for us, but we have to identify it ahead of time, not come to the end of a fiscal year and say, oh, we got 10K again, and then it gets spent unwisely.
But if I heard you correctly, that of the $10,000, roughly 3,500 is spent on dues to a larger lobbying organization.
Has been historically. That I can for sure say has happened in Mayor Gamba's tenure. Well, we paid once and there's a conversation. Yeah, that's right. Yep, sorry.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
then, to your point, Council President Massey, I mean, I think it might be worth considering having some time with a lobbying organization to help us fine tune a legislative agenda, or, some other specific strategy that we can then move forward as counselors.
So are you saying that the, could focus on a legislative strategy rather than a specific lobbying effort?
Well, I mean, so the latter would be something like if we want to focus on Kellogg Dam, and that's what we want to focus our lobbying effort for in 2000, for this coming fiscal year, then that would pay for, a couple hours and some envelopes. I think what I'm proposing, I'm not trying to be glib, I know that, it's an important amount of money, but when you look at the bill for an organization like Thorn Run, I mean, they're consulting with, cities across the region for like $200,000 or $300,000. So this is minor. I think this would be able to get us, in addition to the Metro Mayor's consortium dues, this would be able to get us perhaps a 2 or 3 hour or half-day strategy session to talk about what our legislative priorities look like for 2025 for the long session especially. And if we have this in a biennial budget, maybe we do focus on the long session. But I do feel more comfortable with our full council, to decide on something.
Sure.
Or to advise.
Through the process that Mike outlined, I'll be presenting to council your budget. Good option for them to weigh in as well. But I think we're hearing we'll leave it and we'll bring it at one of the Saturday budget meetings. And then after the adoption of the budget, if it's still in there, then we can make sure we get time on an agenda to talk about that further.
We're gonna get that.
But I think we need to have some forcing mechanism to raise the visibility, because I may have been told this at some point. If I was, I don't remember it, because I really didn't know we had a 10K lobbying line. Did you? Did you?
So perhaps like an annual council budget report
Maybe
that's
it's-
on the agenda to show how.
It's in the bike rack, I don't know.
Well, we're about to go through a process that will enlighten us to a lot of things that I think will then inform what, not only how we want to show up in the strategic plan for the city as advocates, but we might want to look at some strategic strategy, like a strategic plan or set of action steps for the council. And in which case, I think that does fall on the side of lobbying a little bit, so maybe this could be the facilitation of that.
And we will put on a bike rack and we can bring it up, or we can discuss it further at the August council retreat. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Mike.
Anything else?
I think that's it for the work session.
Okay, we'll conclude the work session and we'll reconvene at 6 for the regular session.
Right.
That's it.
We're
Oh. You do know that.